Welcome back to Black and Brown Crowns, the show where beautiful Black and Brown women speak about their career experiences. I'm Cheyenne, your host, and today we'll be speaking about how to become a lawyer with Miss Melanie. What were your interests as a young girl that led you into what you wanted to do as a lawyer?
So I didn't know really early on, very young, that I wanted to be a lawyer. I knew, for as long as I can remember, that I was going to go to college someday, or I hoped to, because that's kind of what my mother kind of brought me up. My mother had not gone to college, but she always raised me to have that be the goal. So I knew that I was going to go to college. I didn't know what exactly I was going to study, and I didn't decide really that I was kind of interested in being a lawyer until about my sophomore or junior year of college. I started out as a psychology major and thought that I wanted to do that. And then after taking a year of psychology classes, decided that wasn't a good fit. So I tried to figure out what else might be. So the law seemed to be one of the things that fit with some of the things that I like to do or did well. Like I like to write, I like to research, I like to argue. And so all of those things seem to fit well into a career in the law.
So I know that you mentioned you went to college. Was or is being a lawyer, do you have to have a degree, or is there another alternative path into becoming a lawyer?
So unfortunately, there's not an alternative path, but there are, I think nowadays, some options. So to be a lawyer, you have to go through undergrad first, which typically takes 4 years unless you do it sooner. And then after undergrad, you go to law school for 3 years. And I think some schools now have combined programs so that you can cut back a little bit of the time. And also some people, like I, for instance, took a little bit of time off between when I graduated from undergrad and when I started law school, just because I wanted to be really sure before I spent the time and money on law school that was the path that I wanted to pursue. And I also, in between undergrad and law school, had a son. And so I had family obligations as well. And I just wanted to be sure that I could juggle it all. But unfortunately, there is no kind of alternative path beyond going to undergrad and then law school and then taking the bar exam to get your license to practice law in whatever states you want to practice.
Was law school pretty busy, especially if you have a family, whether you are like a starting out mom or you're changing career paths? Like, how hard was it to go through law school?
So law school was definitely very challenging. It was, I guess, as you find from when you switch from high school to college, that's a big change. And from undergrad to law school is another huge change. And they have nicknames for some of the years, or at least they did back when I went for the 3 years of law school. Or so they say the first year they scare you to death. The second year they work you to death. And the third year they bore you to death. Because by that point, you were kind of really eager and anxious to, I guess, much like you get to your last year of anything, eager and anxious to get out into the world. Law school is probably one of the hardest things that I've done, certainly the hardest level of schooling, because it's very different, the way that classes are set up and the way that professors expect you to write exam answers and responses. So you have to learn a whole new thought process and a whole new way to approach school that you really had never had to, or at least I never had to do.
Were there any internships or scholarships that you took part of when you were in law school?
So I was fortunate enough to get a full academic scholarship to law school. So that covered my tuition, which was great. And then by that point, I was no longer needing to live in a dorm. So I didn't have that expense. And then because it would have been just very difficult early on to juggle having a job with going to law school, I did not have a job my first year. During my second year, I started to get involved with school activities, and some of the bigger activities in law school is moot court or law review. So I became involved with law review. And also during the summers, I worked in a law firm, which is actually the law firm that I wound up working for after I graduated from law school. And that's kind of the traditional and the path that you hope to take if when you become a lawyer, the goal is the summer after your second year that you get a job with a law firm that you might be interested in so that you can get a job offer from them going forward after you graduate. That's not the way that it always works out, and there's certainly other paths to get your first job out of law school, but that's how it kind of works. And then by the third year of law school, when I had a bit more time, because at that point I was down to electives largely, and had more flexibility in my schedule, I actually became the editor-in-chief of the Law Review. And I also worked a couple of days a week at the firm that I had worked summers at.
What were your typical days look like? Like, were they packed with cases, or did you have some downtime? What were your typical days look like?
So when I was a law student,
Yes.
you're asking? Okay. So, and I guess one thing that I would note is the other good thing that I think with respect to kind of the things that you get to do in your summers and once you get to take some electives is that you do get to participate in internships and externships, sometimes for credit, which is good, so that you can try out different practice areas, or you can try out like different, whether you want to try a law firm or whether you want to work in the public sector. So it's a good, like I had the opportunity to not only just work in the law firm, but for credit, I did a semester at the district attorney's office, which was a nice way to get a sense of the criminal law practice, to kind of hone in more so about what area of the law I wanted to practice. And once I did graduate, because I didn't know very much about practice areas and areas of the law and things that might interest me. So it was a good opportunity to try them out. The days were certainly jam-packed. There was definitely a lot more, reading involved than had been in my undergrad classes, and just a lot of study time outside of class.
Did that change when you became a lawyer, or was it busier or lighter when you became a lawyer?
It was still pretty busy. I mean, it's varied a little bit on the I've been a lawyer for about 16 years. So in those 16 years, I've worked in 4 different places. So in the 4 different places, it's kind of, I guess, I've always been busy, but the level of craziness and busyness has varied somewhat. So I'm a litigator, and unfortunately, I mean, one of the great things that means is that there's always a lot of variety and a lot of different things to experience. But the other thing, as I like to call it in the life of the litigator, is a bit of an unpredictability with your schedule sometimes, because there could be things that come up in your case where the court will give you a short deadline. That deadline could be the day after Christmas when you were hoping to have time off to enjoy. So it just really, I would say it's always busy, but sometimes more manageable than others.
Sort of kind of put it in a nice way. Sounds very hectic, just a little bit. So how were you able to manage your work-life balance? Did it interfere with your personal life, or were you able to come home and like debrief? How did that work for you?
Well, I mean, it's always a balance and a struggle. The times when I would have kind of a long car ride between the office and home, that would be a good opportunity to decompress. Unfortunately, more often than I would like, I would wind up having to bring work home with me, or you're sometimes very much tied to work with your iPhone and your work emails coming in. So I think it's just been a matter of trying to figure out how to balance and how to kind of stay organized. So it's a little bit different when you're first starting out. When you're a brand new lawyer, just like any new job that you start out, you really need to and want to prove yourself and show that you are a really diligent and hard worker. Not that you want to slack off as the years go by, but that particularly is a very intense time. And it also was a lot more challenging, because one of the things that I found is that law school didn't necessarily prepare me to practice law. Law school taught me some of the basics about how to think like a lawyer, how to read cases, how to interpret them, but it didn't necessarily teach me the nuts and bolts of how to be a lawyer and the things that you needed to know in your day to day.
And on the topic of lawyer, when I was researching the different positions for my Instagram feed and giving some information out on that platform, there were so many different names, and I thought it was just lawyer, but there's like attorney, there's lawyer, there was another name that I was just like, what does all of this mean? So what is a lawyer different from, or how is a lawyer different from an attorney?
So in the United States, there actually is no difference. An attorney is a lawyer, same deal. I guess in court, the judge might refer to you as a counselor, all the same thing. That's not the case though, and I'm not really well versed in this, but I think in Britain and maybe other places in Europe, there are actually different names for different types of lawyers where the name may make a difference. Like, you know, that there are barristers, and there are other types of lawyers or names or titles that they give to lawyers. But in the United States, all the same. You know, I don't know how it is that they developed so many different names to refer to the same thing, but all the same. I think the place in the United States, at least, where you'll find the differences in lawyers, not in the attorney kind of lawyer title, but in the practice area, because there are tons of different practice areas and areas that lawyers can specialize in, and could mean that they do totally different things. Like for my entire career, I've been basically a general litigator. I've never specialized in any particular area, but there's certainly, for example, there are corporate attorneys who never set foot in a courtroom and who negotiate contracts and deals and do things that, even though they're an attorney and I'm an attorney, they like speak almost a whole different language, and it's a whole other world and a different skill set. And it's not as though I could easily start, get a job tomorrow and do what they do, and vice versa, with respect to somebody who's never been in a courtroom, to suddenly become a litigator and to be able to walk in day one, knowing how to format documents that need to be filed with the court, knowing how to argue motions, that sort of thing. It's not as though one couldn't figure out how to do the other type of work, but it's just almost like a whole different world, which I think is kind of neat, because it also gives the opportunity for like different personality types. Say, like, what if you are particularly outgoing, and for you, a lawyer means one who's in a courtroom, which is kind of the category that I fell into. That's why I wanted to go into litigation. But say you're more reserved or would prefer to deal kind of on a less public forum and more direct, person to person meeting and negotiation type, and that falls better within your skill set and your personality type, then maybe you don't pursue litigation. Maybe you look for corporate law or other opportunities that wouldn't require those sorts of things.